Hey everybody, this is Mick. Welcome back to A Pile of Books. Today we're going to talk about The Allure of Evil. I'm going to go back to the pile of books and pick out 4 different books that I think investigate and interrogate the question of evil, and generally the allure of evil. Why are we drawn to it in literature? How is it explored in different ways? And what types of beauty can we find even in books that explore evil? I've chosen some books that I think are a little bit off the beaten path, maybe don't at first glance have a really strong through line, but I hope you enjoy it. Most of this series is me just wanting to pick up things that I think are really interesting, fascinating pieces of literature from the past that maybe don't get the respect that they deserve. So join me in this series. Let's go pick up our first book. Our first book that we are going to talk about is The Autumn of the Patriarch. Please forgive my ripped up cover. I tend to be a little bit aggressive when reading and not always take the care that I need. So I typically grab books from Goodwill or from a secondhand used bookstore, knowing that I usually love them very well. Autumn of the Patriarch was written by Gabriel García Márquez in 1975. It is the book just after 100 Years of Solitude, and I think that this is the most important piece ever written by Gabriel García Márquez. I kind of want to talk a little bit about the content of this book, but also why its impact is significant today, and a little bit about how it may help us understand the world that we live in. Ultimately, from a plot perspective, The Autumn of the Patriarch focuses on a strongman tyrant in the Caribbean from an unnamed country who seems to be this embodiment of magnetic evil. He is a tyrant who is completely self-absorbed, who is absolutely focused on just survival, ultimately, but growth and the accumulation of power. The novel is fascinating. There is almost no punctuation throughout it. Like Marquez's other novels, it's written in this extremely beautiful, dreamlike, magical realism in which it's very hard to understand if we are supposed to interpret every event as fact, or if instead it is somewhat of like a myth that is being told to us. Like 100 Years of Solitude, it kind of mimics this Old Testament biblical type lyricism in the way that it is written. There's very little dialogue. Instead, it is just a series of acts. The patriarch did X, and then the patriarch did Y. As I said before, there's almost no punctuation at all, which I really love. It makes the novel very interesting. It feels like this run-on myth or narrative, or somebody just telling you it sitting around the fire. And each of the chapters is divided up really in a compelling and interesting hook, in which each section of the book begins with the next time that the tyrant died, that the patriarch was dead but not dead. He was poisoned but then found alive, or he was overthrown but then came back into power, or they thought he was dead but he had escaped out the back. The novel, as you read it, kind of paints this picture of the patriarch who is unnamed, and he is completely self-absorbed and completely the embodiment of oppressive evil. He subjugates everyone in his country. He forces them to serve him, and in a weird way, they worship him and they adore him. They do see him as this all-powerful strongman figure who cannot be defeated. I don't really see a lot of coverage of this novel, and I'm really curious why no one has really kind of pulled a thread from the patriarch in this novel to the Judge Holden from Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian, because there's this undying, energetic evil that is expressed in The Autumn of the Patriarch that I've seen in so few other books kind of encapsulated. It is a mythical evil, much like the Judge Holden. It's a magnetic and a charismatic evil. And it really, as time has gone on, shown to me as prescient to the strongman ideology and the myth of character that is embodied in a lot of politics that we see today. Now, Márquez was kind of skewering a lot of the corruption that he saw in South America and Central America around him. He is kind of mythologizing the corruption that for decades and decades has persisted across different countries. But it's an extremely applicable novel if you want to today understand the growth of the MAGA movement, of the cult of personality around someone like Donald Trump. This character who cares not seemingly for anyone else around them besides themselves, and yet draws all others to him in a sort of not worship, but awe at his ability and his power and his kind of cunning. There's that famous tweet about, I wonder how old Donnie's going to escape out of this one. And then he wriggles out of it easily. That's exactly who the Patriarch is in The Autumn of the Patriarch. And Márquez wrote about this in 1975, long before we really saw this type of cult of personality character come to power, first in the US, but now I think this idea of this character being proliferated across other countries. I really, really love this novel. I think that if you like magical realism at all, it's something to definitely investigate. It's extremely transgressive. It's a hard read. It's very violent. There's atrocities committed by the Patriarch. But as the novel winds down and you begin to see the decline of the Patriarch, of the leader and the strong man of this country, as you see kind of the worry set in, and you see the plots against him, there's no way to not also kind of fall in love with this character. And from that side, I think it embodies this allure of evil in a way for us to investigate the idea of corruption and evil and what draws us to it, even as we are repelled against it. I'd love to go pick up another one, so let's head back to the book pile. All right, our second book today is a book that I've just been dying to talk about for so long, because there's so many just fascinating aspects to the author, the story behind the novel, and the novel itself. This is The Tunnel, written by William H. Gass. This was written in 1995. It is the follow-up to his short story collection, In the Heart of the Country, and this novel took 26 years to be written. In the Heart of the Country is an incredible collection of short stories focused on the Midwest. It is written in this kind of modernist and sometimes postmodern style. William H. Gass is a professor and an absolute master of the written word. From simply a prose perspective, this is a unbelievable leap and change on In the Heart of the Country, but it is just genius through and through. I really, really love William H. Gass, and I love the trick that he pulled with this book. There's this awesome quote. I'm from the Midwest. I love authors that understand the Midwest. And in the heart of the country, Gass wrote, "Midwest weather always fascinates me. Calamity is what it is, one calamity after another. Now I live at the edge of calamity, the river, which they say is tamed, and then it floods like mad." Gass wrote this about a professor. The Tunnel is about William Frederick Kohler, the main character, who is a professor in the Midwest, trapped in his chair. I believe that the first section of this book is called Life in a Chair. With a book that took 26 years to write, there was a lot of speculation around what this novel would be. Everybody knows the kind of beauty in which William H. Gass is able to write characters, and I think that there was this expectation that this would be his magnum opus. He took so long to read it, and his prose is typically so beautiful. And when he released this, it was critically accepted, but it is also an absolute kind of twist, on the story of what is the author going to release next. It's like everybody waiting for a director to see what movie they're going to come out with. This book is 650 pages of absolutely unrelenting, oppressive, depressive depravity. William Frederick Kohler, who is the main character in this book, is a professor of Hitler studies, and the thematics of this book deal with the entrenchment of bitterness. Bitterness at never having done anything, bitterness at never being able to escape the kind of age of academia, And ultimately, it's about the fascism of the heart, as William H. Gass says. William Frederick Kohler, who's the main character in the book, is a professor who kind of, though he is studying Hitler, has buried kind of his love for Hitler in his own texts that he is writing. He becomes unveiled throughout these 650 pages as an absolutely abhorrent character. He, from a plot perspective, is sitting in his basement writing about World War II history and Hitler, and also reciting kind of things from his past, affairs that he's had, his hatred for his wife, his hatred for the Midwest, his hatred for everything around him, his hatred for himself ultimately. And he begins to just dig and dig more inwardly into himself. And it's manifested plot-wise in the tunnel, which is a literal physical tunnel that he is building in his basement, in his chair, digging into the ground, digging into himself as the book goes on and on. It is unbelievable in kind of the heart of atrocity, which is explored in this book. But the magic of what William H. Gass is able to do is write it through beautiful, beautiful prose, beautiful writing, like Nabokov does so often, and like obviously most famously in Lolita, is kind of display these abhorrent characters, but challenge you in your perception of them because of how like lyrically the words are written on the page. Kohler in many ways is like a Humperdinck in Lolita. He is a kind of a similar, like truly like devilish evil character, but yet his intellect and his power and mastery of the word draws you to him and draws you to itself. I really love this quote from deep in the book that I just kind of wanted to say, just to kind of give you a little bit of taste of kind of the way that the words roll out. And now the hero comes, the trumpet of his people, and his voice is enlarged like a lion's movie. He roars, he screams so well for everyone. His tantrums tame a people. He is the son of God, if God is resentment. And God is resentment, a pharaoh for the disappointed people. If you've never read this before, I challenge you to look at it as an investigation into evil, and also as just like an absolute landmark in the written word of American authors. Speaking of American authors, I have another book that I'd love to pull up that also investigates evil from a very different perspective. So we're going from the absolute tome of William H. Gass next to this beautiful little collection of short stories by Denis Johnson. This is Jesus' Son, written by Denis Johnson in 1992. I already told you about my love of the Midwest. Denis Johnson was a graduate of the University of Iowa Writers Workshop. He lived in Iowa for a long time, and he wrote this collection of short stories, including a lot of recognizable locations if you are a Midwesterner. Denis Johnson writes with an absolutely visceral, energetic, propulsive, kind of deranged style of storytelling. It's very Kerouac, very, very Kerouac. It's very on the road. Jesus' Son obviously is a reference to the Velvet Underground's song Heroin, and the collection of short stories itself focuses on a kind of ragtag overlapping ensemble of drug addicts and criminals kind of scraping through life in the Midwest. The main character, if you can call him the main character, is called Fuckhead. And he pops up as kind of the narrator for many of these stories. He's a side character in a few of them. He is this kind of enigmatic psychopath, realistically, who's just hurtling through life. And the prose and the writing style by Denis Johnson do an excellent job of keeping this sense of momentum, this sense of just unrelenting forward progress. The way that the road feels like anytime you put down the book, you are slamming on the brakes. Denis Johnson's Jesus' Son feels very, very similar. I just absolutely adore his visceral writing style. It's extremely literal. It's very straightforward. It is transgressive because of the way that the character narrates the story in the acts that he does, and the kind of brutal simplicity in which he lays it out is so unique. And as an investigation of kind of deplorable people and the allure of evil, it's an interesting way in which an author can kind of showcase the seedy underbelly. Oftentimes we see the seedy underbelly of a city or a crime group, or we see the seedy underbelly of the Patriarch from Gabriel García Márquez, but not very often do we just see the kind of depravity of the lower class. And with that comes, I think, a sense as you read the novel that is cultivated somewhere just every few stories, every few words. You begin to develop this growing sense of empathy. And I think that Denis Johnson just did an unbelievable job of endearing you to Fuckhead and endearing you to some of these characters. As deplorable as they are, he shows humanity in such a beautiful angle throughout this. I cannot recommend this book enough to anyone. I don't really see it compared to Kerouac that much, but I just think if you like On the Road, if you like that kind of like drumbeat of forward storytelling, these outrageous, outlandish characters with kind of no self-regard for their own safety, they're kind of living on the extreme edges of life, this is the book for you. There's an incredible quote from Fuckhead in this, that in which he kind of, because of his drug use and because of his just like total lack of self-disregard, he is actually broken apart from himself and is given this sense of prescience. And he says, "The traveling salesman fed me pills, and it made the lining of my veins feel scraped out, and my jaw ached, and I knew every raindrop by its name, and I sensed everything before it happened. Like I knew for certain that the Oldsmobile would stop before it slowed, and by the sweet voices of the family inside, I knew that we'd have an accident in the rain, and I didn't care. They said they'd take me all the way." I've got one more book that I really, really think investigates evil from a playful, a curious, and a really, really heartfelt perspective. So I'm going to grab one more for you guys. It's hard to talk about evil without addressing the red elephant in the room, the Faust, the devil, the Dante's Inferno main character. And I think that no book really has ever done this as well as Mikhail Bulgakov's The Master and Margarità. One of my absolute favorite novels of all time, written in 1967. I don't have any time to tell you about Mikhail's background, but he was an oppressed writer in Russia. And this, I think, is his magnum opus, a story about the devil and the devil's minions visiting Russia, and the devil's ball, in which Margarità, who is kind of the Gretchen from the Faustian legend, is invited, and the master, who is a tortured artist, who is her lover, who must find a way to be able to bring her back and save her. There is, in the way that the best books reference mythology in the past, this book references the history of Russian literature in an unbelievable way. I love all the quotes around Dostoevsky that are in this book. It references biblical history in the story of Yeshua and Pilate, which is one of the greatest subplots I've ever read in literature. There is references, obviously, to Dante and to Virgil, as well as to Greek mythology. I can't recommend this enough because the devil and his minions are super cool, right? The devil comes to town and he's got this like Cheshire Cat character who like talks and wears a top hat, and he's got a vampire that he brings with him. And the devil, who's called Woland, is magnetic and compelling and very like positioned as the devil in kind of the Faustian legend, always creating a bargain or something along these lines. And it is the picture of evil like running rampant for most of the book, and it's not in like a immediately torturing everybody in the city when he comes and moves in his minions, but just tomfoolery and cunning and playing tricks and being really the kind of like comical devil, even though he is evil and even though he hates man, and especially hates kind of the master, and he hates what the master represents as the artist. It comes across in the book. It's witty. It's really, really funny. It's extremely engaging. It feels more like a fantasy novel, but you get from it these layers of history around mythology, and you get this really current snapshot of the ideological battles being fought in Russia at the time between kind of atheism and orthodoxy and even Protestantism to a certain extent. The master is writing this book about Yeshua and Pontius Pilate, and I think that the book does this excellent job of showcasing the purpose of evil in its attempt to tear us away from each other. The idea of Pontius Pilate being tortured for his decision to throw out Jesus is the backdrop to much of what happens in this book. And I think it's the best subplot of anything in this book, better than even Master and Margarita's kind of like love story. The book all throughout, it just shows kind of like the discord that the devil sows amongst people as the novel unfolds. I just recommend that you read it. I think it's so much fun. I think it's like, I would try and like read it to kids if it weren't so like kind of scary and transgressive at some points, but it's like, it's a great kind of folklore legend. If you really love kind of reverence for Russian literature, if you love reverence for, you know, Greek myth and poetic myth and the Faustian legend, this is an excellent book to read. And I just kind of want to read this quote from the devil towards the end of the book. This obviously, Woland is the representation of him. He's like a professor, and Matthew from the Bible comes to him and asks for the soul of Master and Margarita. And it's this beautiful exchange where the devil says, kindly consider the question, what would your good do if evil did not exist? And what would the earth look like if shadows disappeared? Because shadows are cast by objects and people. Here's the shadow of my sword. Trees and living beings also have shadows. Do you want to skin the whole earth, tearing all the trees and the living things off of it because your fantasy of enjoying the bare light? You're a fool. I won't argue with you, old sophist, said Matthew. You cannot argue with me. For the reason I've already mentioned, you're the fool, said Woland. Well, let's make short of it. Don't tire me out. Why have you appeared to me, Matthew? He sent me. What did he tell you to say, slave? I'm not a slave, said Matthew. I am his disciple. You and I are speaking different languages, as usual, said Woland. But if the things you say don't change, all that. He's read the master's work, said Matthew, and he asks you to take the master with you and reward him with peace. Is it hard for you to do, spirit of evil? Nothing is hard for me to do, said Woland. You know that very well. But why don't you take him with you into the light, said Woland. He does not deserve the light, said Matthew. He deserves peace. And he said so in a sorrowful voice. This has been Mick, and you're watching A Pile of Books. Thank you for sitting with me while we talk about evil. Talk to you soon.